Hi guys, MC Stu here, back with another budget build. This one I'm going to be going over a science build I put together on my free-to-play account. The ship I built it on is a T5U, nothing special, no specialization, seating, or anything like that. I just really kind of like the way the ship looked. I was able to put together a pretty decent build with minimal traits and not a lot in the way of high-end consoles. We'll do an ISA run like normal at the end, and you can see how the build performed, which I was pretty happy with. So let's go ahead and just jump right on into it. So for free to build and not having a lot of high-end traits like Photonic Officer or improved Photonic Officer, the traits for gravity well, spore-infused anomalies, those kinds of things. I was kind of unsure how this would perform. The only STO ship trait I have is Strike from Shadows, which is something I picked up off of one of the Tier 6 voucher event tokens that I got. So I picked up that ship for that trait. All the rest are pretty, easy to get. This one, if you're on Fed side, is excellent for doing kinetic damage, which a lot of your science abilities like Gravity Well does, and is extremely cheap on the exchange for everybody but KDF. KDF, you have to get a lockbox ship for this. I'm going to kind of go backwards. I'll just go over these traits here first, and then we'll talk about the build, because this stuff's pretty basic. Strike from Shadows gives you additional bonus damage and critical chance. This one comes off the, I believe, the event ship from the last year's anniversary. So almost 1 year ago, because the anniversary event will be starting here pretty soon. And then this one here comes from one of the specialization reps. And which one is that? It's late and I'm having one of those nights. Strategist it comes from. So, and that is going to proc off of your brace for impact, and that's going to give you 6%. No, that's going to give you, get to the other 6%, 20% bonus damage, which covers also exotic abilities. So none of these are specific for an exotic or science build. This is just what I had to work with. They gave basic bonus damages and some things that did complement some of the science abilities like Ceaseless Momentum. I'll say off the bat, it's hard to build a high-end DPS, over 100 EPG build. Control is very easy to build towards. On the free side, there's a lot of gear in game where you can max out control really easy. You can get your EPG skills up really high, but without some of the higher end traits to get those just alpha strikes going, it's really difficult. So I built this more around radiation damage, physical damage, and control. And that was mainly because of the traits that are available to me on this free-to-play account. Some of my personal space traits, these are basically all the same that I would use for on this character tanking or DPS, with the exception of this one here. So this is going to give you a huge boost to your critical chance for any kind of exotic abilities, 50%. So that's massive. This comes from your R&D science. Once you get that to level 15, this will unlock. This one and this one and this one and this one are exchanged. They can be fairly pricey. None of these individually are going to make or break the build in any kind of way. Again, this is just kind of what I had. They're not really science oriented. They do, all damage. This particular one here, stacking all damage 15%. This is going to build up critical severity over time. Context is for Kings is an excellent one for survivability, and it gives you some damage bonus as well that stacks. So again, none of these are really science related except for this guy here, which you can get from your R&D school. And if you're new and unaware, if you go to R&D, and you rank up science to 15, that'll unlock that for you. Use torpedoes training on here, projectile training, for the extra bonus, because I am mainly running torpedoes on the front. And why don't we'll do this kind of backwards this time. Let's take a look at our stations. So as you can see, I only have one tactical ability in this. Had I had, say, entwined tactical matrices or something like that as a starship trait, I might have used this universal slot for that and slotted fire at will, so I could keep torpedo spread up more often. But again, building this on a very limited amount of resources to me, I really had to kind of focus on, you know, what I had and what I could, you know, what I could do to maximize that. So let's jump in the build, and then we'll come back to this here, and I'll explain some of these other science abilities and why I'm using them. So on the front, this is a crafted torpedo. You can buy it off the exchange, or you can craft it yourself in the R&D for projectile torpedoes at level 15 as well. The main reason for this is the damage over time. It's a plasma burn. This particular one, without anything buffed, is going to give me 2,861 plasma damage over 10 seconds. It'll also, let's see here. That's a secondary over 10 seconds upon detonation. Okay, so this will also create a localized cloud for 6 seconds to foes within, it says 0.5 kilometers. So this is good to use with your gravity well. If you put that, say, on an ISA on one of the transformers, suck everything in, and then if you're able to get a spread of this or even one of this, that's going to cover quite a few targets and put a good amount of damage over time on each of those. This will also reduce their turn rate, impulse speed. So if you're running controlled countermeasures, that'll give you another boost to your overall damage output. And I don't even think I ran it on this, but you could do that, and that would be a good option. And that's going to be this one here. Why didn't I run that? Okay, I didn't run this because, so it does give you a good boost, but it gives it to your energy weapons and projectile weapons, which definitely would have helped with, you know, the fact that I have torpedoes. I do have weapons on here, but none of them are doing tons of damage. It was really around that science ability, proccing the deflector, control, and that radiation physical damage is really what I was focusing on. So doing this, that boost would be nice for the torpedoes, but the torpedoes aren't doing that much base damage, so even with this extra bonus, that wasn't really going to buy me a lot, so I didn't go that direction. But you could, you know, if you were building this a little bit different, maybe, you know, with mines, and you were, you know, had a little more gear where you're really boosting those torpedoes or traits for it, then something like that might make more sense for you. Second is going to be the Gravimetric Torpedo. This torpedo creates little gravity wells, or can, and it's decent for crowd control, does a decent amount of damage. It's definitely a go-to on most of my science builds, even on the higher end, on my pay-to-win quote-unquote account. And this comes from the Omega. Is that from Omega? No, it's not. Let's check here. Sorry guys, it's 1 in the morning and I needed to get this done, so I might be a little slow on a few of these here. I don't, it's Omega. It's not Omega. So Dyson Joint Command, you can get that torpedo from there, and it's at tier 2, so it's not way down the list. And when I say budget build here, I'm talking about dollars, real dollars. So some of the stuff you'd have to grind out. There's things that you could replace with other stuff. Like I used the Tilly Shield and the Warp Core from the Discovery rep. If I used something else, that wasn't going to make or break this build. It's just the best thing that I had, so I put it in there. This you would have to get up to, I believe, the tier 5 rating to get both of these here. So when I say budget build, that doesn't mean budget work. You're still going to have to do some work to, to get some of this gear, but none of this stuff came off of any lockbox ships or anything major, or wasn't anything that you couldn't earn in game or through events. If you're missing any of these items, it's not going to break, this build, and it's not going to work. So you'll still be able to perform well. With science, it really comes down to your timing of using your abilities and those kinds of things. In the run that I'll show at the end, I did very well. A lot of it's luck. I mean, I ran a few other ones and I did not perform that well. It wasn't far off. I had one real bad one, but a lot of it's going to depend on your teammates, how fast they're eating up the hit points of the enemy, and how well you're piloting, positioning, and clicking your abilities. That's really what this is going to come down to. Next, I used the Dark Matter Quantum Torpedo. This gives physical damage over time, and it synergizes well with ceaseless momentum. The longer that you're in combat, the higher that boost for physical damage is, and so this torpedo benefits big time from that. This one I think comes from the tier 1 of that Discovery rep as well. Deflectors. So I used the Emitter deflector. This is from a mission. It's a little bit hard to find these days. Once you get far enough in the through the mission arcs here, it becomes available in the mission available tab. So it's going to be under the Lost Dominion. And that is going to come from, I think it's of Bajor. So I think this is the second to last one. So you'll have to do these two of these first. I don't think these are in order of how they pop up, but let's take a look and make sure that's where that comes from. It does not come from that. And I checked this before. Oh, it's because I clicked the wrong one. Oh, maybe I didn't click the wrong one. No, here it is. All right, so this mission you can get these two pieces, and one of these other missions you can actually get the 3-piece if you wanted to get that. You could use 2 of these to get the 2-piece set to boost Polaron damage if you're building a Polaron build on the budget level. You can also get this Omni here, but this is mainly for shuttles. So in any case, I went with this one. I happen to have it the most upgraded, and that's why I picked it, and it had a control modifier built into it. 48.8% is what it comes from right out the gate. With this one being upgraded to Mark 15, it's sitting at 63.8. So I was considering either that or this one here, and I'm not going to go and search for all of these through. So if you're interested in using like this one's stock and it comes in same kind of thing. And it's an easier mission to get to, I believe. This might be on a hidden mission now as well. But anyways, just Google it. And if you'd prefer to try this one out, you can run that mission and get it as well. But it gives a decent amount of control as well. I think it's pretty close to being equal there. All right. Next, Deflector. Deteriorating secondary Deflector. That's definitely the one to go with. Basically what this does, it gives you boost. You can re-engineer it, and that's all important, depending on which way you're building towards, EPG or Control. I use this one because of the what it does. So down at the bottom here, radiation dot to target of Science Bridge Officer abilities. So what I use on my spam bar are these 2 abilities here, destabilizing resonance beam, and also the Acheron beam. Both of these have a fairly quick cooldown, and so they'll fire often. And every time you use these 2, or Gravity Well or any of the other abilities, that's going to proc this secondary deflector and put that radiation burn on the enemy. Without any kind of procs or anything like that running or boost to those, that's 7,000 radiation damage every second for 9 seconds. So that adds up, especially if it's a large hit point target. Generally on your science builds, your secondary deflector is going to probably be doing the most amount of damage, especially on a budget build. So you need to have abilities that you're going to be able to have up often so that you're being able to utilize that function of it. Gravity Well has almost a minute cooldown time. So does some of these other ones. So you want to make sure that you have a few others in here that are going to be doing that. Same thing with like Charge Particle Burst. That's going to also proc that. So you have to make sure in proximity. But if you can get in proximity, say you put a Gravity Well on something, it pulls in a bunch of enemies, you get close enough to proc this is going to hit all of those enemies and put that 7,000 radiation damage on each one of those enemies every second for 9 seconds. So that's huge, just by timing those things out right. So Gravity Well, pull them all in, get close enough without taking warp core breach damage, and pop your Charged Particle Burst. It's a way to put quite a bit of damage out. And so you can already see on science, there's a lot more, I don't want to say thought, because there's a lot of thought that goes into, cannon builds and the way that you fly those, but there's a lot more timing and a lot more abilities that you're needing to kind of click at the right times. If I just click this with one target next to me and it was almost dead, I'm not going to get a whole lot, out of that. Not a big bang for buck. But if you pull them all together, get close, you pop this, and you're able to hit multiple targets with it, then that one click just, was times 10 in terms of its usability for you. Next, I use this engine pretty much on everything. It's the prevailing... oh god, I keep saying it's late, but it's just so I don't read good. This is from the competitive rep. Basically, anytime I use a firing tactical ability, it gives me a speed and turn boost. On this build, I only have the torpedo spread, and that's it. So it's not giving me a huge amount, but it helps get you positioned and moving around the map a little bit. If this was a different ship with a slightly different seating setup, I might have some other tactical firing abilities. They do make a science version where anytime you use a science ability like that, it'll give you that proc, and that might make more sense for a build like this. But this is the one that I have for some of the other builds that I do on this character, and so I don't want to have a million different flavors of each one, because it does take dilithium and some grinding to get it all done. Next is the space set that I had mentioned, warp core and shield. This, like I said, is mainly because this is pretty much the best one that I have. The biggest reason for this is the two-piece, and the two-piece basically is going to give you a huge amount of regen, so that's going to help you stay alive. Science attracts a lot of attention, and staying alive obviously is a good thing, since you can't kill bad guys if you are dead. Down in the back here, I have an omnidirectional Polaron beam. Again, this was the best weapon I had. That was 360 degree, so it went there. There is no other reason that's there. You could replace this with something else. Moving on, we have the advanced Thoron infused Polaron beam, and the only reason this is here is for the two-piece with this guy here. Yes, with this here. This is a good torpedo. I played around actually with having this up front. I didn't have a great run with it, but again, that's so situational, so I may switch these two around and just see. This has a radiation damage over time component to it as well, so it might make sense for this to be in the front, and I'll have to play with that more to see if that makes sense. If you copy or use some of this build and you have these weapons, I would definitely try that out and see what kind of difference that makes for you. So the two-piece for that and the beam is going to be down here, additional radiation over time. Cooldown for the torpedo as well, 20%. Since it's not in the front, it really was only there for the two-piece. If it was in the front, this part of the two-piece would be a lot more beneficial, obviously. Also, a real quick note: if you're new and you're wanting to go science and you're grinding up, some of the different reps, a better set would be the temporal set for this. The two-piece gives you a good boost to the damage over time as well. If I had that on this character, that's what would most likely be here. Devices. We're using the Deuterium Surplus. When you click this, it gives you a big boost to your flight speed and turn rate. Defense is kind of meaningless, but it's a nice little extra. Move you around the map. Positioning's huge. Doesn't matter what kind of build. If you're, if it's taking you forever to get across the map, you're not doing damage. You're not putting points on the board, and most likely your team is killing stuff before you get there. Next is the Subspace Field Modulator. And this is basically here for the damage resistance rating. If I start to attract that attention and I'm starting to take damage, I'm going to click this, and that'll help mitigate some of that with the damage resistance rating for 15 seconds. Next is batteries. You can craft these, I believe, at tier 5. It might be tier 10 of your science R&D system. Definitely want to use these. 20 seconds gives you 20% bonus damage to all exotic damage. So must have. You want to definitely have these on your ship. Next, I have a Lobi console. I wanted to try and build up the crit chance since we're not using any kind of tactical consoles for the most part here. This is a Lobi item. You could replace it with I probably would replace this with, what would I put there? I would put this guy right here, the assimilated module. You won't get quite as much crit severity out of it, but you will get crit chance. And does this have control? This has a plus 30% control experience on it as well. This comes from once you get up to tier 1 completed of the Omega rep. This is a great alternative to the Lobi, because if you missed out on some of the events, it takes basically money to get Lobi, or at least keys to open boxes to get Lobi. The events over the past 2 years has provided us with a decent amount of Lobi, so I've been able to get some of this stuff on this free-to-play account. So basically, you lose out on a little bit of crit severity. You would gain a tiny bit of control expertise by going with that alternative. Next, we have the Tritium D. This is here mainly for the survival aspects of it, the damage resistance, hull cap, shield cap, although, as I say in all my videos, I mean, the shields are basically worthless in this game at this point. And then also the boost to auxiliary power. So in a science build, whatever you do with this is up to you, your power ratings, but you want your auxiliary power maxed. Think of your auxiliary power as power for exotic abilities. So if this was a cannon build or a beam build, we would want our weapons power maxed out. Since it's a science-oriented build, you want your auxiliary maxed out. I opted next for engines because, again, I need to be able to get around the map. If you can't get around them, it doesn't matter if you do just billions amounts of DPS. If you can't get there to actually deliver that DPS, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what build you're in. It doesn't matter if you're tanking. You're not even DPSing. If you can't keep up with your team, be in the right places, then you don't matter. So that's why I decided to go into engine power next and get as much speed as I could. This is a mission reward as well. And let me take a look here if I can find where that comes from for you real quick. Ragnarok, I think, maybe? Yep. That's Ragnarok. Let's run that through, pick that up. It's a great console to have. I use that on my free-to-play tanking builds as well. It's a good survival console to have. All right, science. These come from your fleet research lab. So they give a significant boost to control and to exotic damage. There's different flavors, control and drain, EPG and drain. There's ones where it's the same as this, but the numbers are flipped around. So like, for instance, this one is a control heavy with secondary exotic, and you can get the version with those numbers reversed, with EPG being the larger number there. These give a decent boost to that. The big reason for these, though, is the proc that you have there at the bottom. So 25% chance plus 6% bonus exotic damage for 30 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times when you're using a hull or a shield heal. And so that is going to be exotic hazard emitters, It even counts here for your brace for impact, which also is giving us that damage boost from the trait that we have from the specialization tree. And then we have auxiliary power to structural integrity. So all three of these items have a 25% chance of proccing this console for that 6% bonus damage. Bonus damage is huge. Bonus damage is like having 2 plus 30% base damage boost to something. So that's huge. And I have 3 of those consoles. So if I'm, running these constantly, and these two especially recharge very quickly, you see how that can add up really, really fast. I mean, one of these at 5 stacks is going to be giving you 30% bonus damage times 3. That's just huge. That's a huge amount of bonus damage for anything. So these, again, they come from your Fleet Research Lab, and they're pretty inexpensive compared to the tactical consoles. Much, much cheaper. Next, I have the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This is here for the extra auxiliary power, because that is the power that that powers exotic abilities. You get some shield cap. Again, don't really care about that. And this has a nice little bonus where, depending on where your auxiliary power is set, you can get an extra 2.5 critical chance and 10% critical severity. And since this is a science build and that is maxed out, that setting for our power, we're getting the full benefit of this. This comes from the mission Butterfly out of the Iconian arc. I use this also on DPS builds, especially on the budget end, and especially if I'm not using Aux to Bat. If you're using Aux to Bat, this isn't really worth it on a DPS build, because when you activate auxiliary to batteries, it drains your auxiliary, and that's not doing anything for you. Next, we have the Temporal Shielded Core. This gives you additional damage resistance for physical damage. It also gives you damage resistance for kinetic, which are 2 of the biggest killers in the game. Getting hit by a torpedo spread from the Borg will end your decent ISA run real quick. So stacking that stuff up definitely helps with that survivability. It gives us a boost also to control and to EPG, exotic abilities. And that comes from a mission as well. I believe it is in Ice Run. I think that is also in fact, I pulled it up here. That comes from obtained. Okay, so that comes from Future Proof, the Arc, and Temporal Reckoning is where you're going to want to get that from. Temporal Reckoning. So right here. There's been a serious temporal incursion. Run that through once and pick that up. Free of charge. All right. Next, we have this. This is kind of weird. This is actually a mission reward, but it is a part of a set from the other pieces are from the rep system, which is kind of a weird thing. The 2 piece is real nice for Phaser, Disruptor, Tetrion, and Plasma. Gives a 2-piece bonus damage. I have this here, though, for the extra radiation damage. This is going to get kind of in the weeds, so I'm not going to go real deep into it, but this gives you a boost to non-exotic radiation damage. There's a difference. If you want to know about that, look it up online. Basically, all you need to know is there's only a couple items that do radiation damage that is not exotic, and one of those happens to be this torpedo here. So if you look at the radiation damage rating that it has there, and if I remove this will drop down. This is kind of a waste, I guess, since I have this in the back. So again, I do plan on putting this back up front and doing a few runs over the next couple days just to see how that does. So again, if you're going to play around with this build, I definitely look at trying to get this torpedo on the front, because this is benefiting this quite a bit if you're getting a good amount of hits off that. So definitely look at messing with the positioning, and you don't have to switch this out. I mean, switch out whatever you want and try it out and see what works. This comes from a mission reward as well, and that mission reward is it future proof? It is this all in a surface tension? Yep, surface tension. There it is. I just realized I missed one as well. This is a from the, it's a lockbox cross-faction item. Basically, you can get it off the exchange. They fluctuate in price. I got mine pretty cheap, like 2 million. You can earn that in 2 days of tour the galaxy almost. Selling gear, those kinds of things. It can fluctuate. I don't know where it's at right now. This is here mainly to give me those extra boosts for exotic and control abilities. The clicky, I'm kind of I mean, the numbers look all good, what it's going to do. I didn't really see anything major on the parse, but again, a lot of that comes down to when and how you're clicking things and what you're clicking it on. So I'll have to continue to play with that to see if that clicky's making a big difference there. But the passive stats on it are definitely worthwhile for your budget end builds here. Basically, your science, it's easy to get consoles to put in here that are going to boost your control, your EPG. But if you can start boosting your EPG, in other slots of your ship, then that's going to allow you to really build up, what you're pushing for here, which is science abilities. This item, same thing, cross-faction box. You can buy it off the exchange, and again, this is here for those passive boost. Same story on the clicky on this. I'm up on the air how effective it is or isn't. It probably can be very effective. I mean, if your clicking ability is correct and delivering this in the right place. Again, the clicky didn't have any kind of noticeable effect on the parse from the ISA that I'm going to show here at the end. Lastly, we have the chronometric capacitor. This is another mission reward. This comes from Future Proof. Yes. So it comes from this. The reason this is in here is the very good amount of EPG it gives you, especially when upgraded. It also gives a boost to torpedoes. If I had the Omni, which I don't, I only had the heavy Polaron cannon. I decided not to use it, but the two-piece gives a pretty good boost to your auxiliary power. So if you're lacking on that and you need a little bit more, go with that two-piece set. All right, next, let's take a look here. I had to clip it there. My kid came in the office here at 1:15 in the morning. I'll talk with him about that tomorrow. Should be asleep. Okay, so that's all of the hardware that's on the ship. Let's take a look at the stations that we're using. So we kind of touched on these already. These are mainly here to proc that secondary deflector. The destabilizing resonance beam does do quite a good amount of damage. And it does physical damage, so it is going to be procced by this ceaseless momentum trait. I would definitely get this trait for torpedo builds and torpedo builds on the high end. This is kind of the cornerstone of that to a certain degree, and for science builds on the budget end. I'm even using this on my high end science builds on my paid for accounts. And it's super cheap. You can, if you're fed or Romulan aligned fed, definitely get that. All right, so we covered those. I got torpedo spread. This is giving me the speed boost, and since I have torpedoes on the front, that's what made the most sense. Spread around those torpedoes. All three of them have a damage over time effect. In fact, all four of them do, including the one that's on the back that's mostly not firing. All right, next we are using emergency power to engines. Again, we like to move fast. This doesn't really get you moving that fast, but what it does is it procs a duty officer that I have that I'll show you in a moment. Basically, if you use evasive maneuvers, and once that is finished being used, a couple seconds after, if you click this, it'll give you a 100% cooldown. I'll click that while I'm talking here, and then we'll click the emergency power so you can see that. That's the only reason that that's there. I find if I click it right away, it doesn't work. But if I wait like a second and I click it, bam, drops it down 3 seconds, and that's ready to go again. So that's huge for getting around the map. I mean, this combination is a must-have on all of my builds. We have the emergency power to structural integrity. This is here to proc the science consoles. Next, I have the Oh, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. In any case, this did radiation damage, and so it just seemed like it made sense, and I didn't have anything else to put here. We'll have to take a look at the parse and see how that did. All right, next, Subspace Vortex. This comes out of a box as well. It can be purchased off the exchange. It can vary in price as well, from $1 million to a couple million. Very good to use after doing a gravity well. Pull them all in, drop that in there. This scored pretty decent on the parse, and again, it's so situational because, you know, how many did I pull in with this, and how many did this affect before some of them started dying? Science is so finicky like that. It's not just, you know, spraying, you know, torps or cannons and, you know, into the mess of them. You're just eating up the damage. Timing is really everything. Tychon's Rift, I'll probably change this. This puts one of these other ones on cooldown, I believe. So I don't use it a lot unless these other ones weren't up. But it does do a decent amount of drain and kinetic damage. So this is filler, and it goes with the theme of what I was kind of working for with that radiation damage over time, kinetic, physical damage aspect. Photonic Officer. This is here to cool all the abilities down. If I'm not running Aux to Bat, I am running this. This reduces the recharge of all your Bridge Officer abilities, except for Photonic Officer, by 3% every second for 20 seconds. 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but it does when it's ticking every single second. So something is on, you know, cooldown for 50 seconds. You know, that first second that it ticks, there goes 2.5 seconds. Next second, there goes a little bit less than that, and a little bit less, and it ends up basically bringing your cooldowns on most of your abilities to 15 to 20 seconds. So definitely need to have this. Gravity Well 3, pretty self-explanatory. This is here for crowd control. It also does quite a bit of kinetic damage, and with ceaseless momentum building up, that starts to stack into this pretty significantly. You can see I have this up to 12 kilometers. That is the maximum, you know, range that you can get for pull. So not bad. You want to be careful where you're using these too. You want to be careful that you're not pulling enemies away from where everybody, say, is about to leave, because almost everybody's dead and now you're stringing people across the map. Generally, I'll put this on the middle cube in an ISA, and then on the gate. If it's going longer, you could use it, say, on a transformer. You just don't want to do that too close to the end of that transformer being destroyed, because then it'll start pulling spheres from the middle over to the side that you're done with, and you're now needing to continually mop up stuff that's getting pulled over while you're trying to get to the transformer on the opposite side to complete the mission. So just kind of be aware of where you're dropping these gravity wells. Crowd control is one of those things, you know, that you can really kind of not just mess yourself up, but the rest of your team up. So, you know, really kind of pay attention to where you're dropping those. All right. So next we have hazard emitters, and hazard emitters is here to proc the science abilities. It also gives you, you know, decent heal. I think it's a heal over time. And does this proc? It does not. Okay. Yep, so this is here to heal you ongoing and to proc those science consoles. And that's why I have these on the clicky bar. These are things that'll proc those consoles or proc my deflector. There are other things that proc the deflector as well, but the cooldowns are a little longer. This one here, the cooldown's not real long, especially with Photonic Officer going. You can use it a couple times, but it's situational. I don't want to be, you know, around one sphere and using these abilities on it and this just going off, when I could have saved that maybe for another 20 seconds later to use it on a group of spheres where I got a lot more bang for buck out of it. So if you're using a spam bar, especially on science, there may not be as much. Normally I'm hurting for space on my spam bar. You know, I wish I could fit more on it. With science, I generally have a lot left over because they're situational. You need to time those abilities out. All right, let's take a look at what is next. So we went over the traits here on the top. Let's take a look at the space reputation traits. So we're using these two for the crit chance, crit severity. Doesn't matter what kind of build you're doing, crit chance, crit severity is always worth it. We're using auxiliary power configuration based on where your auxiliary is set, which ours is set at maximum. This is giving us 7.8% bonus all damage. So again, that's huge. That's Cat 2 damage. So that's equaling out to 30 to 40% base damage to your exotic torpedoes, all of your damage abilities. All right, next we're using particle generator amplifier, and this is giving us another bonus damage, 6.3% to exotic damage. Excuse me. And then lastly, I'm using Tyler's duality, and this is for the additional crit chance. So off of this, we are getting 3.4% extra crit chance. You could argue you may not need that since we're using this, and this is giving your exotic damage abilities plus 50%, which is huge. So you could experiment maybe with something else, maybe controlled countermeasures like we discussed earlier might make more sense. Down here for active, I'm using the sensor interference platform. This is damage avoidance. When I get in between the cube, the attack cube, and the gate, I'm going to drop this right away. I don't have lots of, I guess this one has a little more heals. I use this on quite a bit of my different kinds of builds. Because I find healing, unless you're building towards tank, I find that the healing ability, especially if you're in the middle of still taking damage, don't do as much as you'd like it. And so really dropping threat, getting them to leave you alone, avoiding damage, I find is a lot more effective if you can use it correctly. So drop this in, that attracts the attention of the bad guys instead of myself. This guy here basically generates shields. I use it on everything, and I don't know, maybe it just makes me feel better. I'm dropping it out for other people that think shields are good. I don't know why it's there, but I guess building up any little bit of extra safety mechanism like your shields can't hurt. But like I said, shields are just not very effective, especially against the Borg. All right, so anti-time, entanglement, singularity. This does physical damage to the enemies. Again, I'll try and use this, say, on the gate that has a gravity well, and it gets the gate and a bunch of spheres that it pulled in, kind of an area of effect. And then lastly, we're using the quantum singularity? Yeah, manipulator. So this kind of activates or acts like a cloak. Or does act like a cloak. So if you're starting to take a bunch of damage, this will get the enemies off you for a period of time. It also gives you a big boost to your science stats for 8 seconds. So you can use this also as kind of a boost when you're activating maybe the gravity well or your particle burst or something like that. All right, so that covers all of our traits. We went over the stations. Let's take a look at the skill tree. It's pretty standard, except I took some points out of hull regen and hull capacity, and I put them into the control section here, and then I took some points out of our power here for some of the different systems and filled up, excuse me, the exotic particle generation to get that skill level all the way up. Okay, and then specialization, temporal operative. Obviously you want to do this, going to boost your damage over time, exotic abilities, all those kinds of things. It also gives you the I think it's called the backstep. If you hit a certain amount of health, it can only happen so often, but it basically will transport you back a distance, most of the time out of combat, depending on where you're situated. So it can be a nice little save if you're suddenly getting slammed by the enemy. Duty officers. Let's go over those real quick. So I am using the Photonic Officer. This is from the Phoenix packs, from a very rare Phoenix token, and this guy will, as demonstrated, will proc your recharge of your evasive maneuvers when you activate emergency powered engines. So I use this on pretty much all of my builds. Next, I have a Projectile Weapons Officer. This is going to have a chance to reduce torpedo recharge by 5%, or I'm sorry, by 5 seconds, 20% chance. Next, they had given this duty officer out along with a pack from the Star Trek cartoon that's out currently. And again, I'm just kind of working with what I have, but this on basic torpedo hits, there's a 20% chance to create a cloud of waste. Basically, it's giving a toxic damage over time ability. So complements that damage over time abilities that we're pushing for on this science build here. And that's why that is there. Next is a Deflector Officer. This is going to give a 10% chance to recharge your deflector abilities, which are going to be, these guys here, gravity well, basically just about all of your science abilities. And that'll cool it down 80%, so 10% chance. If I had more of these, I might do something different, or if I had another slot open, I might have had more than just the one. And then lastly, we have a research lab scientist, and this will give a 20% chance to placate when using, let's see here, is this, I meant to put this for charged particle burst. So that's this guy here. So this is going to have a chance to placate the enemy, as well as activating the ability of your secondary deflector. So those are the duty officers that I'm using on this build. Let's go ahead and jump into an ISA and see how this performs. we are back. Take a look at the parse here. As you can see, this build did pretty decent. I mean, for basically a zero money build. And again, you know, that positioning, piloting, I got lucky. I'm definitely not the best positioner, pilot, those kinds of things. So this was a good run. I was extremely happy. This was actually the first run I did after I put this together. 129,000 DPS a second, or damage per second. So not bad at all. Big spike at the beginning. That's pretty standard. Everybody's buffing everything up, and you know, you got all of those enemies together. And then we maintained a pretty decent damage rate through that whole run. So not bad at all. Bunch of decent spikes here. Nothing like, you know, on the paid account where you're spiking up into the millions, but again, without those traits, getting those alpha strikes and things like that it's very hard to make something like that happen. Let's take a look at some of the individual stuff here. Everybody else on the team did well. You know, they went to the middle, went to the left, went to the right, came back to the center, did all the things they were supposed to do. I did a couple other runs where people went all over the place, and it was just a huge mess. Spheres all over the place, and we were in there for 5 minutes, and it was a nightmare. So as you can see, that secondary deflector, that's generally going to be your biggest damage dealer. That radiation damage over time is huge. If you can keep proccing it with some of these abilities and, you know, your other clicking science abilities, that's going to do very well. The pets did pretty good on this. Some of those are, let's see here. So Photonic, Dreadnought, that's from your Photonic Fleet. This is Science Captain ability. So you can call them in. They basically act like, you know, the, what is it? The one that we all have. Top of my head. That is fleet support. Jesus Christ, come on. Yeah, fleet support. So they basically act like that. There's a trait you can use that unlocks in there that'll make these be available to sooner. Generally, this is a one-time use. I'll pull them in at the end when we have all kinds of bad guys everywhere, lots of targets to hit. So and they perform pretty well on this parse. Anti-time entanglement did okay. That's not terrible. For all that, and then the Nimbus pirate distress calls, these come from the Nimbus missions. You'll have to Google those. You can slot it actually from your inventory, so that's these right here, which is kind of nice. So basically you just have them in your inventory and they'll show up in your list here, and you can slot it, and I have them down right here. I use them pretty much as a heal, so they come in and heal you, but they also do damage. So nice little piece there. It's free. You just got to run the Nimbus missions. I think it comes from the last mission in that chain. I think it's like Installation 18 or something like that, if I remember correctly. So that's where our pets. You can see just all this stuff just adds up, and adds up enough to become the second highest damage dealing on that run there. Plasma particle emission theta radiation. So this is from that torpedo in the front, the first one that fires, and this isn't actually from the torpedo strike. This is from that damage over time effect, that radiation cloud that it has. Gravity well is going to be second, and some of these kind of flip positions. I mean, your deflector is always going to be on the highest as long as you're keeping those science abilities going. The rest of this is going to kind of jump around a little bit. But as you can see, I mean, the torpedoes, they all did kind of okay. It's really their secondary effects that are, you know, really doing well for us. Just kind of scroll down. There's quite a bit of stuff on here, and you can pause and take a look if you're interested. These numbers on the bottom generally aren't going to get a lot better. The stuff over here, though, making minor changes, maybe moving those two torpedoes around that we discussed. That's where you can see, in some cases, some of these numbers double or change, or depending on how you piloted, where you placed your gravity wells, you'll see those, you know, perform much different. All depends. All depends on your timing and your positioning. That's really what it comes down to. So I hope this was helpful. That's pretty fucking good for, you know, a free to play budget build science build. I mean, if you're doing 40, 50K in an ISA, you're doing really well. You're helping the team. You're having fun. You're moving through it quickly. You're doing great. You're doing over 100. I mean, you're killing it. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I mean, this was kind of a unicorn run, it seemed like to me. But I think one of the other runs that I did, I was able to hit just over 120. So the build works. The piloting worked. There's probably other people that can make some minor tweaks to this and are better pilots and could do even better, than the numbers that I'm getting. So, in any case, I hope this was helpful. Science is kind of complicated. I mean, we kind of glossed over kind of a lot of stuff, but you got to decide what you're going for. Is it EPG damage oriented? Is it control? Do you want to focus on that radiation damage over time? There's a lot of little kind of nuanced differences, in the science. Depending on the traits and the gear you have, you can do a few of those at once. But if you're a newer player and you're setting up your science build for the first time, pick one and go for that, and then maybe mix in, EPG. So start with control. That's a pretty easy one to get, that physical kinetic damage, and then, start maybe tweaking it to get a little more EPG damage out of it. There's a lot of resource for individual parts and stuff, but I don't see a lot of science stuff, at least not explained in a way where newer players can kind of look at that and say, okay, let me grab these parts and do this. It talks a little bit more, theoretical, if you will, and then it's up to you to kind of go and work that stuff out. So, the stuff that's on the ship is pretty easy to get. Some of the, if you don't get the low-B stuff, that's not going to break the build. If you don't have some of that rep gear like the space set, that's not going to make any difference, in terms of that kind of output. Do all the free-to-play, mission rewards, get that stuff. Get your fleet modules from your science, from your research lab, put it together, play with it, have fun, and make tweaks to it. I find most time I'll throw a ship together and I'm disappointed, and I'll have to run it a couple times and kind of tweak it, and then I'm like, man, this is actually now working. So go for it, don't give up, make some adjustments, and then expand on it. And you can have a lot of fun with science. So again, I hope this was helpful for everybody. I really appreciate you watching. I encourage you to subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. There'll be a link in the Discord, or there'll be a link for the Discord in the description, as well as some other links to some helpful videos and some other STO content creators. If you're looking for something more on the high end, Augmented Dictator Gaming is excellent. If you're looking for just a real good time, lots of knowledge, entertaining guy, Kyuucontinuum, he's on YouTube and Twitch as well. I encourage you to check both of those guys out as well. So again, I appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.